the statues on Easter Island, the Nazca Lines, the Great Sphinx, and budget bikes. What do these all have in common? Well, they're inexplicable phenomenon. What is a budget bike? Well, let's dive into the mystery coming right up on RC's Outdoor Gold. Hey everybody, welcome back. This is RC with RC's Outdoor Gold. So we're gonna do a little something different today. This is gonna be more like an opinion piece than anything else. My opinion might not be right, so I could just see you typing it in the comments right now about what you think a real budget bike is. There is a lot of noise on the internet on this topic, and there's one thing that I know that we could all agree on. Nobody could agree on what a budget bike is. That's number one. Now, as far as budget bikes go, a lot of people say a bunch of different things. Is it a Walmart bike? Is it a budget hardtail? Is it a budget kind of mid-level full suspension bike? Well, let's kind of look into that a little bit. Now, as far as my opinion goes, I think there are multiple categories of budget bikes, but there's one that I'm definitely gonna hone in this episode. So what is a budget bike? Well, before we get into too much detail, in my opinion, the budget bike is the best bike that you could possibly afford. If you could afford a Yeti SB150, that's a budget bike for you. If you have a $300 budget, Walmart might be the place to go. There is no set thing on what a budget bike actually is. There's no specific standard. And Walmart bikes are fine, but the main issue there is they're mostly good for making viral videos on YouTube, and that's about it. Additionally, there are also budget hardtails out there. Again, I want to stress this. The best bike out there is the one that you're riding. Now remember this, there are a couple different categories of the quote budget bike, but I'm honing in on one. Now I'm going to hint at it. If you've been following my channel for a while, you'll know that I've done reviews on the Yeti SB100, so the 100, the 130, 150. In my 150 video, I had a great comment, and it basically says, well, I can't afford this bike right now. And honestly, neither can I. It's a really expensive bike, but it's a great bike. But does that mean that I always can't afford it? I might be able to afford it a year from now, 2 years, 3? No, I don't quite live under a rock. I do know that bike costs are extraordinarily high, and then the cost associated with just owning a mountain bike just continues to go up year after year. So what is the best budget bike potentially? Well, I know bike shops can't get mad at me for this. Mechanics always are trying to sell these. It is a used bike. It's amazing how riding a mountain bike on rocks and dirt, maybe scratching the paint up a couple times, it can significantly reduce the value of that bike pretty quick. I think it was Matt with Shut Up and Ride that said a mountain bike loses 40% of its value the second you take it out of shop and try to resell it. And that's probably true. The first thing that I want to let you know about a used bike is that sometimes it's not always the most appropriate budget option, and I'll talk about that in just a second. It's a budget bike because it carries the most risk, way more risk than a lot of new bikes out there. And when I'm talking about used bikes, I'm talking about buying from an actual third party, your fellow mountain biker, and I'm not really talking about demos. Now, speaking of risk, what are the risks of buying a used mountain bike? Number one, there are no warranties. And since there are no warranties, if you get kind of a dud out there, you could be totally on your own, and you could be upside down hundreds of dollars overnight, and that's just not a really good option. And at that point, it just becomes a component salvage. Number two, you also are going to be subjected potentially to what I like to call maintenance taxes. This all comes down to how the previous owner has treated the bike. Did they service their suspension bearings and replace those? Bottom bracket, tires, wheels, are they dented? What about the suspension? Has the suspension been serviced, and does it need to be serviced? All that stuff could add up to hundreds of dollars really quick. And then number three, which doesn't have as much weight as 1 and 2, but it's basically what I like to call your upgrading costs. So it's all going to come down to personal preference. It's about making this bike yours and putting components that you want. A lot of times, if somebody's, like for example, running Continentals and you want to run Maxxis, it's as easy as swapping tires out and putting new tires on. So, and sealant, grips, pedals, a saddle, That stuff adds up real quick, so pay attention there. Now, assuming that you avoid all these critical pitfalls in buying a used bike, and believe me, we'll dig more into that going forward, this is where that budget part is gonna come in. This is where you're really getting the most bang for your buck in mountain biking. Now, I can't guarantee deals like this all the time. I can't guarantee deals like this online, but in my experience, I've seen $2,000 entry-level full suspension bikes sold third party for $300. I know that because I had one and I sold it. I also had an additional $2,000 Cannondale trigger that I'd bought about 2016 or so, and I ended up selling it for $600. You'll actually see that bike on one of my first videos for More Fun a couple years ago. Now, that bike wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but for $600, that's a lot of bike for somebody that's just getting into mountain biking. And of course, with the Cannondale trigger, it ended up MSRPing around $4,000 when it first came out. I ended up getting it for $2,000 and later on sold it for $600. So you can kind of see how that devalued over time. Now, like I was saying before, they're kind of different tiers of budget bike purchases. And not all bikes are going to fall into that $300 to $1,000 to $1,200 range. Sometimes a budget bike, in my opinion, could be even $3,000. It just depends on what it is and what comes with it. The budget bike is the best bike that you can afford, and sometimes, again, it's going to be a used bike. So I got a cool little example right here. This is my current favorite. This is my buddy Cameron, and he bought himself a used bike. Check it out. What's up, guys? We are now out at the Lunch Loops, and I'm going to show you one of my favorite budget bike builds out there. This belongs to Cameron. Ayo. Yo, let's go check it out. This is Cameron's used Rocky Mountain Slayer build, and I would argue that's a budget build. Now, it's not free. It's not $400. It's not $800. It was how much, Cameron?
28.
No change. Hundo.
It's a 770 MSL, so that means that it comes with reverb dropper post. It's a full carbon frame, which we all know the Slayer is. Comes with the Lyric fork, super deluxe out back. So
yeah, I mean, at
take over.
12 speed, I mean, that's pretty good value in my opinion. And then not to mention the carbon hoops. Now, of course, whenever you buy a used bike, there's going to be some things that you have to replace out there. Is there anything that you've had to replace or are planning to replace going into the future here?
Tires.
So obviously there's not that much tread left on those tires, but they're still serviceable for a while.
I did have to replace the chain early on, yes.
But I mean, at the same token, I mean, that was 40 bucks that you've spent onto the bike there. Outside of that, I mean, this is a complete bike that is going to outperform a lot of brand new bikes at $2,800. Because you're getting better components, you're getting more performance, and you're getting just a really good ride.
Just modern, man.
A bike like this, even in 2019, a 2017 Rocky Mountain Slayer is still relevant. It's still a bike that like shreds, it accepts all the components of like new age bike technology. So I'm really stoked on this build, Cameron. Hey, thanks for, let's do some shredding down free lunch and go from there. So to recap, Cameron gets a stud bike at about $2,800 and it's loaded with premium components. Even if this bike was a catastrophic failure, at the end of the day, at least he could have a pretty good haul on general components and he doesn't end up too upside down. The consolation prize being a RockShox, Lyric fork, super deluxe, carbon hoops, etc. His bike maintenance taxes weren't too high. The suspension linkage was great. He had a great buying experience, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later. Of course, there were a couple upgrades that have to be made. He ended up getting a $40 new chain. He will have to buy some tires probably mid-season. And also, I kind of recommend him getting something like Cushcore for his carbon rims. So he's kind of on the hook for those. There's no warranty, and I would highly advise protecting that purchase. So all in all, used bikes, are they the real budget bike? Let me know in the comments. And if they're not, what is? Don't forget to smash that like button, tap that notification bell so you don't miss any mountain biking. And if you haven't already and you're new to the channel, subscribe. That does a lot for helping me out. And there's a special place in my heart for the people that share my videos. I really appreciate it. This is RC's Outdoor Gold, and I'm signing off. Thanks for tuning in. and we'll catch you next time. Peace.